What does the new Donald Trump administration in the US mean for Israel, Palestine and peace? I'll ask top Israeli diplomat and former settler leader Dani Dayan. I'm Mehdi Hassan, also on the show. With anger at the ANC reaching unprecedented levels in South Africa, I'll ask Nelson Mandela's granddaughter why she's now come out against her grandfather's party. But first, does the election of Donald Trump mean Israel now has a pass to do whatever it wants? Or will the Netanyahu government heed President Trump's request to take a break from illegal settlement building? Who better to ask than a former settler leader and close ally of Prime Minister Netanyahu? This week's headliner, Israel's Consul General in New York, Dani Dayan. Dani Dayan, thank you for joining me on UpFront. Many Israelis on your side of the political spectrum, the right of the spectrum, celebrated Donald Trump's victory in the US election after years of tension between your government and the Obama administration. Yet even President Trump has asked your Prime Minister, and I quote, "As far as settlements, I'd like to see you hold back on settlements for a little bit." Will you listen to him? Will Prime Minister Netanyahu listen?
Well, actually, our cabinet already made a decision to listen to the president and to formulate a new policy of some kind, people refer to it as restraint. I don't know if that's the proper word, but yes, actually, factually, we did.
So your government agrees that there is a problem with settlements, that it's counterproductive to keep building settlements?
No, that's your interpretation. You asked if we will take into consideration the request of the President of the United States. I answered positively to that question. The motivation, the rationale is different. We agreed to take into serious consideration the positions of the President of the United States. But that doesn't mean that we agree with the rationale of that request.
But you haven't listened to the President of the United States, not this one or the previous one. Your government retroactively legalized almost 4,000 illegal settlements built on privately owned Palestinian land in February, a move the Israeli opposition leader said would damage the state of Israel. It also approved the construction of the first entirely new settlement in the occupied West Bank for more than 20 years. Yours is a government, Dani Dayan, that's bent on taking land from the Palestinians, not making peace with the Palestinians.
No, that's propaganda, what you said, not facts. Maybe you mean 4,000 units, housing units, not settlements. I understand that for you, every single house is a whole settlement. You are not the first one that made that kind of mistakes. Even American officials in the previous administration made that kinds of mistakes.
Thank you for fact-checking the number.
It's indicative.
What about the underlying issue?
No,
it's a nice evasion, Dani Dayan. What about the retroactive legalization of illegal units on Palestinian land? What about the building of an entirely new settlement? How is that listening to the US president, let alone obeying international law?
Look, again, the whole issue of settlements is so overblown, so overrated. The basic problem is not settlements or not settlements. The basic problem, all those are technicalities. The basic problem is whether the Palestinians recognize Israel's right to exist, whether the Palestinians recognize that Jews are also indigenous to this patch of land that we call Eretz Israel and they call Palestine. Okay. The moment the Palestinians will come to terms with this fact, with this reality, believe me, Mehdi, all other issues will be solved in a matter of weeks.
Okay, I believe the Palestinians recognized Israel's existence back in 1988.
No, that's exactly the problem. Okay. This is the basic problem. You touched now the gist of the problem, Mehdi. The problem is that the Palestinians recognize, maybe some of them, Israel's factual existence. They do not recognize its right to exist. Okay. They do not recognize that not only the Palestinians are indigenous of that patch of land, but also Jews.
Hold on, a Palestinian state does not exist and Israel does exist, so it's funny we talk about whose right to exist is at threat. But just on the issue of settlements, because you nicely evaded my original question, you called it propaganda. Do you deny that your government retroactively legalized almost 4,000 illegal settlement units and announced the construction of an entirely new settlement? How is that showing restraint? How is that restraint?
Well, that is exactly the definition of restraint. First of all,
doing something the leader of the opposition says will damage the state of Israel and the security of Israel.
Israel did not legalize, as you said, 4,000 settlements, not even 4,000 housing units. They passed legislation that may make that possible, and it's still under judicial consideration. So we are you are talking about something that may or may not happen. Regarding the construction of a new community, yes, we evacuated the community of Amona, and the people of Amona are entitled to live in new homes. Now, you are confusing here between restrain and freeze. We did not agree to freezing the construction in Judea and Samaria. So you are really here, that is exactly the definition of restraint, but it's not the definition of freezing. If what you're looking
and
is
isn't the problem that there's never going to be a deal over land and settlements as long as the Israeli government is filled with religious fanatics who say God gave them the land?
Now, Mehdi, you are not going to drag me into a theological discussion. I am not there. I am a secular person. I am not going to be dragged, as you said, into a theological discussion. The reason we are in that part of the world is history, is that this is our homeland. Now, the moment the Palestinians will recognize that this is our homeland, as is their homeland, I'm not saying it's exclusively our homeland, that there are two people that are indigenous to the area we call Eretz Israel and they call Palestine, that day the peace process will start. Okay. That day the peace process will start, and you will be surprised how forthcoming Israelis will be.
You say I'll be surprised.
Unfortunately, the Palestinians are going exactly in the opposite direction of denying
I'll talk to the
Israeli
Palestinians when I see them on this show next. But I've got you in front of me, the Israeli government representative. You say that you don't want to be dragged into a theological discussion. You said, I'll be surprised at how much the Israelis are willing to compromise. I will be surprised because this is what Naftali Bennett, the Israeli education minister from your government, said on this show just a few months ago. Have a listen.
If you want to say that our land does not belong to us, I suggest you go change the Bible first, come back and then show me a new Bible that says that the land of Israel doesn't belong to Jews.
How is that not religious fanaticism to say we're not going to give up the land because the Bible gave it to us? It's 2017, Dani Dayan.
Mehdi, that's the religious argument. This is not
from an Israeli government minister speaking on behalf of your government.
Let me finish the answer, Mehdi. The Bible is one of many, many reasons that you can believe the Bible or not. But if you do believe the Bible is one of the reasons why the land of Israel, Jews are indigenous to the land of Israel. It's not the only one. I prefer, there are so many reasons. And it's so obvious, by the way, that the land of Israel, the Jewish people belongs to the land of Israel, that Minister Bennett used the biblical argument. I prefer to use other arguments. There are so many that you can pick and choose.
President Trump is the first US president to say openly that he's not bothered if there's a two-state solution or a one-state solution. Now, if memory serves me correctly, because you and I, Dani Dayan, spoke last in 2013, you support a one-state solution, don't you, in which Israel just annexes the West Bank and there's no independent Palestinian state ever.
No, actually I don't. That's correct that I told you more than once that I don't believe that the two-state solution is implementable, but I didn't mention at all a one-state solution. But it's also not relevant. You know, the moment I accepted Prime Minister Netanyahu's offer to join the Israeli diplomatic service and to serve as Israel's senior representative in New York, my private positions. I will the last person to underrate the importance of ambassadors, but ambassadors do not make policy. Ambassadors represent policy.
Just to be clear, do you support today a two-state solution?
I am very comfortable with representing the current government.
Okay, and the current government claims, somewhat cynically some may say, to support a two-state solution. Do you support a two-state solution, Dani Dayan?
I represent the position of my government, which Prime Minister Netanyahu formulated very clearly. If the Palestinians will recognize Israel as a Jewish state.
Okay, so the Palestinians recognize Israel. Will an Israeli named Dani Dayan recognize a state called Palestine?
No, you are trying to rephrase Israel's position.
No, I'm asking you your position, Dani Dayan. You're sitting in front of me. We've spoken before. Do you support a two-state solution?
The only important thing is the policy of my government. The policy of my government, the Prime Minister Netanyahu, is that if the Palestinians will recognize Israel as a Jewish state, and Israel will have security responsibility over the whole area, in that case, Prime Minister Netanyahu will agree to a two-state solution.
But do you understand why so many Palestinians don't believe that that policy is a real or genuine policy, given Prime Minister Netanyahu keeps appointing people like yourself and Naftali Bennett who clearly don't believe in a two-state solution? What's the point of having people like you represent the government when you clearly don't share the policy of that government, do you?
You know, I fully represent, I am fully identified with the policy of this government.
So you support a two-state solution?
Actually, I endorsed and I campaigned for Prime Minister Netanyahu during the last elections. So to try to put on my slim shoulders the responsibility for the lack of a solution to the conflict.
That's not what I said at all. I simply asked you whether you supported one. And I think the viewers see that you're not willing to answer that question. By the end of 2020, Dani Dayan,
I will tell you, Mehdi.
Okay,
unfortunately, I don't believe that right now it is possible to achieve the two-state solution. And the reason is that the Palestinians their demands are so intransigent that as long as they don't agree even to consider the recognition of Israel as a Jewish state,
they obviously would disagree with every word you're saying.
Okay.
But by the end of, I just have to,
that's exactly why we have a conflict.
Of course,
because we think A and they think B.
Of course, and one side is the occupier and the other side is occupied. By the end of 2020, there will be more Palestinians, Dani Dayan, in the entire territory now controlled by Israel than there will be Jews. At that point, would you still be okay with the status quo, given a minority of Jews would be ruling over a majority of Palestinians, many of whom won't have the right to vote for their rulers? How is that not apartheid, Dani Dayan?
Well, first of all, I think the facts that you presented as a fact are not true. I assume that you include in that count the Gaza Strip, which definitely is not under Israeli control, as you know very well.
The United Nations says it is still occupied, by the way.
Israel withdrew
the UN doesn't agree with your view on that.
Even we took our dead persons from their graves in Gaza. There is no civilian, military.
But you control the airspace, the borders, the water. Yes, you do.
Not. Actually, we do not control the border with Egypt.
Okay. But you control three of the other four borders. Okay,
because
Dani Dayan, back to the question.
Because they are a belligerent state, the moment they will stop to
Jews rule over Palestinians and don't give Palestinians the right to vote. Are you okay with that? Because people like Ehud Barak have said that would be apartheid.
I am not okay with that. I am not okay with that, Mehdi.
Okay. A controversial UN report said for the first time last month that apartheid already exists in the occupied West Bank. It was later withdrawn under US pressure. It's becoming harder and harder for people like yourself to shut down the debate over Israel and apartheid, isn't it?
They say that Israel itself, in its treatment of the Arab Israeli citizens, is an apartheid state. Well, that's so absurd that the Secretary General did the right thing in ordering the withdrawal of that infamous document.
My question was, it's becoming harder and harder for you to shut down. In the past, whenever the A word was mentioned, it was shut down as outrageous, offensive, anti-Semitic. Now it's becoming more and more common, not just amongst human rights groups, UN officials and others, but Israelis, leading Israel. Ehud Olmert, Dani Dayan, your former prime minister, came on this show last year and said to me, yes, he believes Israel will be an apartheid state if there is not a two-state solution ASAP.
Well, I don't know. I am not responsible for what Mr. Barak said. You know that in Israel, internal politics are very frequently, as Mr. Kissinger once said,
but Olmert, Barak, Rabin, Ben-Gurion, all of them have warned about apartheid.
I will tell you, what you said is widely known in very narrow circles. But look, I will tell you, Mehdi, if you look at take a map of the world and look at the bilateral relations of Israel these days in most countries in the world, I tell you with all responsibility, Israel was never less isolated in the world than these days.
But you're still losing lots of votes at the UN Security Council. You're still being attacked for your human rights abuses, for your illegal occupation, for your settlement building. You are. I mean, you may not agree with it, but you are. We are attacked by Iran and Venezuela, yes. Oh, no. I think Chancellor Merkel has attacked your settlement building. President Hollande has attacked your settlement building. The British Prime Minister has criticized your settlement building. The US State Department has criticized your settlement building.
I didn't hear all of those persons criticizing Israel's human rights records. Yes, we have.
Really? Have you ever read the US State Department annual report on human rights abuses? You should have a read. It's an interesting read.
We have differences of opinion on the issue of settlements. Yes, that is a fact.
Dani Dayan, we're out of time. Thank you very much for joining me on UpFront.
Thank you, Mehdi.
The far-right National Front are through to the second round of the French presidential election. They say they've changed, but have they? UpFront producer Lucas Radicella has this week's reality check.
Like 15 years ago, the Front National is once again in the final round of the presidential elections. But this is the new Front National, not the one co-founded by a French member of the SS, and definitely not the one whose leader says the gas chambers are a detail of history. This is Marine Le Pen's party, free of its fascist and racist past. But is it really? Yes, they've excluded Jean-Marie Le Pen from the party, but he still remains honorary president. The Front National is still called the Front National. Marine Le Pen is his daughter, and one of its only 2 MPs is his granddaughter. And then there's the dozens of FN candidates that have been spewing racist abuse online. Take Gérard Brazon, who says Islamophobia is a right and fighting Islam is a duty. Or Jean-Christophe Gruot, who called immigration a cancer and denounced the Africanization of his city. Granted, a lot of these more extreme candidates have since been excluded, but when your party keeps attracting the most outspokenly racist elements in French society, maybe it's time to look in the mirror. And finally, it seems Marine Le Pen's inner circle isn't squeaky clean either. Frédéric Chatillon, a longtime friend of hers who was on the 2017 campaign payroll, was the leader of the infamous nationalist group GUD. He also reportedly organized parties celebrating Hitler's birthday and owned a bookshop that traded in Holocaust denial literature. After being called a neo-Nazi by a French journalist in 2014, he sued for defamation and lost. One of the witnesses, himself a former member of the GUD, said under oath that Chatillon had, quote, a sick hatred of Jews, and said the only problem with calling him neo-Nazi is the term neo. Marine Le Pen, however, disagrees.
Frédéric Chatillon n'est pas un nazi, je n'ai pas de nazi autour de moi.
Well, it doesn't help her case that a replacement as head of the FN had to resign because of accusations of Holocaust denial. He reportedly said that it was impossible to use Zyklon B for mass extermination. Plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose.
Since the end of apartheid in South Africa, the country has been governed by one political party, the African National Congress. Under ANC rule, millions have been lifted out of poverty and literacy rates have shot up. But the party of Nelson Mandela has also been plagued in recent years by allegations of rampant corruption and sexual misconduct, as well as protests against current President Jacob Zuma. And Mandela's own granddaughter, Ndileka Mandela, has announced that she will no longer vote for the ANC, becoming the first member of the Mandela family to take such a stance. She joins me now from Johannesburg. Ndileka Mandela, thank you for joining me on UpFront. You've said you can no longer vote for the African National Congress, the current governing party in South Africa, the party of your late grandfather, Nelson Mandela. Why?
For me personally, there are 2 instances that had brought this to a head. It is something that has been coming slowly. 2014, I launched a foundation called the Thembekile Mandela Foundation. It put me face to face with the lives of the people in the rural areas, because our concentration is in the rural areas in terms of health and education, which are the 2 major pillars that my grandfather knew they were critical in a thriving society, and also youth development. When we are confronted with the level of abject poverty of children studying in schools that are falling apart in the Eastern Cape, of children with no ablution facilities, of children who miss school when they are menstruating because of a lack of sanitary wear. It is in contrast to what is happening within government, because when you look at the wasteful expenditure that is happening within government, it then brings that into sharp focus. I will make an example of something that happened recently. 8 million was spent on one day on a birthday party. That birthday party, that 8 million could have built classrooms for schools
Whose
that are
party?
falling apart of children. It was President Jacob Zuma's birthday party.
So is your specific criticism against President Zuma or against the ANC or both?
If you look at any corporate environment, if things are not working, if the wheels of a corporate environment are not working, the person to take responsibility and accountability is the person leading that organization. It is the same with government. The person that is accountable to take accountability on what is happening in government, it is the president in any administration. So I would say the leader and the ANC government.
7 out of 10 South Africans say, according to the polls, that they would like to see President Zuma stand down before the end of his term. Do you agree with them? Do you share that view?
I share the view that the leader must go back to the basic tenets of the ANC, the basic tenets of the Freedom Charter that says that the people shall have schools, the people shall have land, and they shall have education, and they shall have health.
But should he stand down before his term is over, as many people are calling for?
If the people are calling for that, yes, he should listen to the people and then step down.
And here's my question to you, Ndileka Mandela. Why withdraw your support for the ANC now? These issues of misgovernance, waste, corruption, they've been around for a while. There's nothing new, or did you just notice them now?
I did not just notice them now. As I said, that it has been something that's been building up over the number of years. The last 3 years of Granddad's life, I spent it by his bedside, and it consumed my time. It is when I started the foundation that I was confronted on a daily basis with what people, not that I did not see it before, but when you come face to face, it's a different thing from reading it from the news and seeing it firsthand. I saw firsthand the abject poverty of the people in the rural areas and what they suffer.
And what do you think your grandfather would say about all of this now if he were alive today?
I would take my response would be, I would refer back to what he said when he was alive. Because he said, if the ANC does what the apartheid government did, you must do the same that you did to the apartheid government.
Do you think the ANC government is now the equivalent of the apartheid government?
Well, it would be unfair to compare them to the apartheid government. But there's certain things that they could certainly do much, much better, and they're not doing.
And what about the critics who say, well, hold on, your late grandfather, Nelson Mandela, for all his amazing achievements, is partly to blame for some of these problems that you identify within the ANC and the South African government today. They're part of his legacy.
I would like to say to those people, can they share with me what strategies would they have employed were they confronted with the same things that Granddad and his comrades were confronted with back in the day? Because if you would remember, they were confronted with there was a bloodbath, and we're on the verge of a civil war. What could they have done to make things better? I would really love them to share with me what they have done differently.
And what about your cousin, Ndileka Mandela? He wrote you an open letter recently, didn't he, saying, the ANC does not belong to any individual or grouping. It is our collective duty to set our house in order. He made a plea to you to be part of the effort to breathe new life into the ANC. What do you say to your cousin?
Mehdi, I feel it is a fallacy to think that the vast majority of people that vote ANC, who are not card-carrying members of the ANC, who do not belong to the ANC structure, those people that I belong to are not a card-carrying member of the ANC.
One final question. Do you worry that the ANC's behavior in office is so bad today that in your view it could end up tainting the entire memory, the entire legacy of the whole anti-apartheid struggle?
I say to you, that is why we as the people, as it is enshrined in the ANC document, the Freedom Charter, shall govern. That is why we are calling the ANC to account, to embody the values and the legacy of our founding fathers, because it was not Nelson Mandela alone. He has said so numerous times that he was not alone. It was a collective effort. It is a collective effort of those people that we are asking the ANC government to uphold.
Ndileka Mandela, we'll have to leave it there. Thanks for joining me on UpFront. That's our show. UpFront will be back next week.